Okay, welcome to the final session for today, I believe. So we will probably do it for 2 or 3 hours now, so be prepared. We're talking about cloud, so that could be in a couple of hours of talk, so we'll traverse that in detail. Honestly, now let's kick this off. And my name is Magnus Svensson. I work at a company called Eyevinn Technology. We are helping the media industry with expertise in video workflows, and cloud versus on-prem versus SaaS versus self-serviced is a big part of that. So, but I have experts with me, so you don't need to listen to me all the time. So let's start with presenting the experts we have with us, starting with Matt.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Matt Herson. I'm a principal solution architect with AWS, that cloud company that we'll be talking about a bit, and I'll pass it over to Corey.
Corey, TATA Communications. I'm more or less a systems integrator within the company, but I deliver services for broadcast customers.
Barry Owen, Chief Solutions Architect at Wowza. We do end-to-end packaging, transcoding, both software and services.
JP from Qualabs in Uruguay, and I'm CEO of Qualabs, and yeah, we do software engineering for media and media technology companies. So we do a bunch of cloud and non-cloud work, even though Matt paid me AWS credits to say the future is only cloud.
Wow.
That's not the credits.
No.
So maybe we should, because when we started to prepare for this and we traversed a couple of mails back and forth, we realized that there is a definition here also. What is cloud, or what is it, hybrid workflows? What is it SaaS or is it self-deployed? What is a data center? So maybe we can just go through that a little bit, and I'm starting with JP. So what are the definitions and options and variants out there?
Oh, so you had on one side infrastructure that was like cloud or on-prem or hybrid. Then you said SaaS, and that's a business model, so it doesn't have to do necessarily with where you're running it. And what was the other? Sorry.
Self-serviced or deployed in a container, or
yeah, that's also a piece of self-service. It's a way of delivering the service, but not necessarily where you're running it. So you could do self-service Wowza and actually download it and install it in your own infrastructure, or you could do SaaS and do it in the cloud. So maybe that's my fast answer to your question.
Barry?
I think oftentimes people kind of conflate SaaS with cloud, right? So if you're using a cloud solution, it doesn't mean you're using a SaaS solution necessarily. It could, but it doesn't. And I think sometimes that gets blurred, and then you get into the whole, business model versus deployment model questions.
I think that's a little bit what's confusing the discussion a lot, because, like you said, a lot of people are conflicting SaaS solutions with the cloud, and so that's a little bit. What's your take on this, Corey?
Personally, like I've always used the term, especially the last several years anyways, is software-defined platform. Whereas if we're in a cloud environment like AWS or GCP or something like that, we're actually building television platform services that traditionally we would build on-prem in a hardware-based model in a CapEx world. And we're moving that quickly to OpEx, cloud, software-defined layers, because we're actually no longer in control of the hardware layer. And that's kind of how I define it.
Matt, anything to add to?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to thinking about your application and your workflow. Where do you need it? How do you need to access it? What's the physicality you need versus the access patterns you need? And then the skill set that you have around that, whether it's consultancy partners, whether it's your own staff internally, that will help drive kind of the direction that you're going to be thinking about going. But I think it was well covered from the difference of infrastructure versus cost modeling versus operations.
Yeah. So let's look at the differences between going fully cloud versus a hybrid approach versus installing it in your own data center. Where do you see the different models applicable, Matt?
Yeah, so
you might be biased, but
I might be slightly biased just based on my name, but that's it. It really comes down to where do you want your infrastructure to sit? Where is it going to last? And where is it going to operate? And how wide of scale do you need, right? Are you operating in one city, you have 10 streams, and that's all you care because you're a small broadcaster and you just have a couple of workflows? Or are you worldwide and all of a sudden you care about F1, PGA, and all these major events where you're going to have 200, 400, 4,000 streams at a time coming around the world, and you need to have secure networking, scale, operations, and everything you need at a touch of a button, right? The idea of consistently going. Now, in reality, I think it's both. I think there's hybrid, I think there's cloud. I don't think it's one answer to solve everything, but it comes down to what is the best operational strategy to get across the line. And very few companies in the world can just walk into their local data centers and go, magically 3 more racks appeared. Magically, I have all these switchers and compute, GPU. And by the way, I have a production that's starting tomorrow and I need an N+1. That's really hard to solve on premises without extreme planning. And Corey, I think you said this before, the 5-year cycle of these assets or 10-year cycle of the assets, depending on how you look at it, it becomes a very different story, especially since you need to go today, not tomorrow. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it really kind of comes down to, you know, your business operations, right? Can you do a fully baked 100% in cloud model? Most broadcasters cannot. They have studio infrastructure, they have cameras, they have sound stages, they have other physical entities that they have to do their operations, and their business requires that. I think from an outsourcing perspective, you can put a lot of the compute in cloud for processing, transcoding, media asset workflows, even like some of the hybrid REMI models that I have been building over the last, I would say, 5 years or so between Activision Blizzard and CBS Sports and other entities that I've been at. We always kind of focused on the idea that it's always going to be this kind of hybrid world because we're never going to replace satellite trucks. We're never going to replace production trucks. There are certain pieces of built-in infrastructure that we're just not going to get away from. And so it's always, in my opinion anyways, the optimal approach is always going to end up being more of the hybrid on-prem cloud type handoffs. And real quick, I know I'm kind of rambling on here, but inside of AWS, you know, you're still limited to the 4 walls that AWS allows you to play in. There are certain broadcast gear and components that just won't work in a cloud-based environment. You can't push EVS into an Azure workload, if you will. There's certain things where, you know, you can't rack IRDs in AWS, right? They have satellite services there, but then you have to provide your own teleport and other things to make it work, right? So there's certain things that from a traditional on-prem model, you kind of still need to support those operations because they can't be left and shifted to cloud.
Barry?
I think flexibility is the key, right? So I tend to agree that hybrid is probably the best combination for most use cases. You know, if you have 5,000 traffic cameras on a dedicated fiber optic ring going to an on-prem thing, you have to go to the on-prem thing, and that's where their video wall is, and that's where the processing is. Now, they may then send that to the cloud for other things. Or if you have a stack of servers sitting somewhere that you need to take advantage of for whatever reason, that's great as long as you have a predictable workload to run on those servers. But at the time, you know, one of our customers does a lot of youth and amateur sports streaming. They have a fixed load that they know they're going to need to support, but then they also allow UGC. They allow people to stream from their phones. There's no way they can predict what the load on that is. So, you know, bursting to the cloud and running those things in AWS is the only way for them to really accomplish that anyway with any sort of reliability and not over provisioning their on-prem resources.
So JP, how do you guide your customers, or how do you help your customers to select the best tier?
Yeah, so there are many questions to answer to it. The first is it's a business decision. It's not just a technology decision, because it's a matter of how their needs are going to evolve during time. Like, as you said, is it going to be a fixed need, or is it going to have spikes? then like, what else do you need from the cloud? Because the cloud nowadays it's not anymore like a computer, but someone else's computer. You have the AWS case that you have all these services that you start using. So the way you architecture your solution is not just the same you had on-prem, but now running on an EC2 instance. It's now you could be actually leveraging cloud services, but then you have okay, how do I do multi-vendor? How do I do multi-cloud? And how do I connect? So interoperability is a challenge. So depending on their needs I need to have more than one vendor. I don't want to be vendor locked. That's a usual question from tier 1 clients. Then it's, this discussion of whether TCO exists or not as terminology, or if it makes sense, but what does financially make sense if you look at it in 3, 5, or 10 years, but also how future-proof is it? Because you know that also the cloud providers are investing on their services and evolving it, and you don't want to be redoing that all the time. And maybe you decide to rely on AWS they're going to figure out whatever MPEG Dash looks like in the future. I'm just going to use their packager, or no, I just want to use them as an infrastructure itself. So I think that the answer to that question has varied a long time. So at the beginning, we started as a company 8 years ago. I would say from 2018 to 2021, we saw everyone running like everything needs to go to the cloud. It was cloud is the only way to the future. I'd say in 23, we saw a lot like, maybe we should start doing some stuff like not in the cloud. And we have a lot of on-prem cases of specific like high volume encoding with these dedicated hardware, or because the use case and the business case makes sense. So I think it's first the business, it's operational, it's also a matter of skill set. Like, do you have the people trained to maintain those workflows? Do you maintain that infrastructure? Because it's not the same having a sysadmin with an IBM server than having now someone running Kubernetes and not caring about switches and wires. So it is a multi-layered approach until you get to, okay, maybe this is the way you should go.
Barry nodded a couple of times. Do you have something to add?
Well, I think also, that I kind of agree that it feels like everybody really over-indexed on cloud and potentially SaaS, right? And then they wanted to pull some of that back for more control or whatever the reason is. And now you're starting to see a lot of things that are shifting to edge workflows where they're trying to do the data processing, as close to where the video started its life as they possibly could, and then move that to the cloud as needed. So I think some of the ways people are approaching those workflows, even doing like, some of the inferencing and stuff very close to where the encoder is or where the video originates before, then journeying to the cloud for further processing.
Corey, any?
Yeah, I mean, I think Barry's spot on. In a lot of ways, since COVID, I mean, COVID was the big push to cloud because we had to get our operations back online. We had to get TV programming in some way, shape, or form back up and running, right? The whole industry basically shut down overnight. So I think we've learned a lot since the shutdown and the big push to cloud. I think we're better educated today in going into 2026 than we have been about cloud over the last 5 years, for sure, right? It was cloud, even 6, 7, years ago, it was really just moving your company's website and your transactional engines and all that kind of stuff to cloud. It was not really a media workflow centric kind of opportunity to have a discussion with somebody about. COVID hit, and then oh my God, the world just came to a crashing halt. I can't make any money. Like, how do I support my kids? Like, we all started freaking out. So that's why cloud became kind of a thing to move our media workloads to. And so now we're, to Barry's point, we've done it. We've done the experiments. We know kind of what it looks and how it feels and what are the costs, and we're just more educated to be able to define what our business needs are.
Do you think all organizations are ready to run in a hybrid environment, or?
I think, yeah. I mean, a lot of broadcasters already are, right? I mean, whether it's your data center or somebody else's data center, it doesn't really matter. The compute lives outside of that broadcast facility somewhere, right? There is some workload that lives outside of where that sound stage is at, where the show desk is for whatever it happens to be that you're doing. So I think that we've already been doing it. I think that utilizing cloud providers like OCI, Azure, AWS, it's just been a natural evolution of the tech stack that's at the fingertips of the engineering folks.
Matt, you have some parts that you can also deploy on your own data centers and on-prem as well. And how do you help your customers to select those cases where it makes sense to put it on-prem?
Yeah, I mean, when I go back to what Barry just said about, on-premises compute at the different scale, right? Chips are always going to get smaller and faster. That's kind of the pendulum that keeps swinging, smaller, faster, lower heat, hopefully. That's what we keep driving towards. So I agree, inference, video creation, processing closer to the edge makes a lot of sense. It also reduces the total overhead you need to transit past that point and keep the assets you need. To your point, when we look at the kind of business operational efficiency, we see a couple different pieces. One is customers will just lift and shift. They'll just go straight to the cloud. And that's a huge part of the COVID experience where people just went, I have this application set, this workflow, move it from A to B. And that's great, except it's not efficient, right? You're just shifting it. There's the modernization that has to happen. So to answer your question more directly about how do we approach this, we look at what the application set is, what they're trying to achieve, and what is the best strategy to get from A to B to C, right? Not just lift and shift, but like how do we make it the most economical decision? There is AWS and Amazon Outposts that you can put on, which is infrastructure that's cloud connected. You can put servers, GPUs, you can run infrastructure there connected to your cloud infrastructure that's available to you. It's all great and dandy, except it needs to make sense, right? It needs to make sense for the way you're going to operate, the way you're going to scale, and the way you're going to interconnect. Some customers look down that path and go, you know what? I have 100 video streams. I need to transcode them. I have virtual workstations. I need to run all these on premises today. When we start looking at the economics and the scale of how they operate for 8 hours at editorial. The rest of the time it's offline. Do you really need that on premises? Couldn't you stream it, put in a direct connect, 10 gig, 100 gig, et cetera, get to the right bandwidth you need, and spin up the infrastructure at a variability that makes sense, and maybe over provision a little bit on the front and back end, because work happens, right? Life happens. I would say think about where you're trying to go and leverage your resources accordingly. I think the other side of the conversation was skill set, right? An IT admin today that's used to unplugging the cable, plugging it in, running PowerShell, and et cetera, it is a re-outfit of their skill set. The previous panel talked about AI and how it helps them. There's learning from a humanistic perspective, there's tooling to help operate, and then there's automations along the way. I don't think it's one set answer. I think it's all three together to make it so you get to that outcome.
Yeah. I think it's a good segue into AI because we had a previous panel talked about AI and has AI changed the decision making around on-prem versus cloud versus these type of things, or?
Yeah, so this gets into a really interesting story of, are you trying to make a model? You trying to refine a model? You trying to use a model, right? It's going to infinitely change the way you approach the problem. Without going too much deeper and giving my other panelists opportunities to talk, because I can talk way too much, and not everyone wants to hear that, I would say the majority of the market is going to land in the use a model and refine a model. I think the majority of people that are going to train are the big names that you can think of off the top of your head, and that's not going to change much. But when we think of like Anthropic and others that bring really diverse models, you can train for your use case, use inference creation, use your tool sets, whether it's container-based or local-based if you have the tooling, and then use that to refine your process. So yes, AI tooling will make a big difference. It will help guide what you're gonna do, but that doesn't negate a data architect, a data scientist, operational strategy. You still need to have an idea of where you wanna go. Otherwise, you're gonna burn through a lot of dollars really quick and have a lot of questions to answer.
Corey, you were part of the previous panel. How do you control the cost of using AI if you put it in the cloud completely?
Well, AI at the last panel, my assessment was use AI for what it truly could be used for operationally to optimize your business, etc. There's this AI kind of hype train right now where it's like we should apply AI to everything, and I don't think that that's necessarily agreeable with most folks, just because the financial venture that it takes, the capital in which you have to invest in running your own model versus working on a trained model. I think that we like to toss the word AI out a lot about like it's this future thing, and it maybe is, and it's going to do, I think, some good with certain media workloads, but it's not a silver bullet, right? It's like the lift and shift. It's like we're just moving the orchestration from kind of people to a bot, right? To some degree. I mean, it depends on what it is you're trying to move, but things like caption creation, things like speech translation, things that like will go through and optimize video codecs. I think those are the opportunities that we have with AI. And I don't know how much money it would cost to build those things, but at the same time, what's the ROI back to the business? Is it hundreds of thousands of dollars, or is it millions of dollars? And you see data center providers, AWS, Microsoft, Oracle, they're dumping billions into building these data centers. So I don't know what the end of the train here is going to be. I'll pass it on.
Well, I think, so reeling that all back to cloud versus hybrid versus on-prem and AI.
So good.
So, I mean, I think AI can make people more efficient in their deployment strategies and their selections of services. So you could put a bunch of AI in place that maximizes your on-prem footprint, knows when to go provision stuff in the cloud,
Sure. Orchestration.
even bring in services where appropriate, because you can't build everything yourself, and you're not going to run everything on-prem, even no matter what you're doing, right? DRM, you're not going to run your own DRM server. Why would you? Some things are always best conserved as services. So use AI to kind of balance that out. You could even use AI probably to help you optimize the costs along the way. And it's really about, in that case, it's intelligent process automation of kind of known workflows that AI agents are really good at, right? So you give it the rules, and it can go do a lot of this stuff for you very efficiently. And maybe that mitigates some of the cases where your sysadmin isn't a video guy, doesn't know the video stack. Maybe you can automate some of that away. I mean, you're not going to get there 100%. It's going to be like Oscar. He's going to make stuff up every now and then. Going to get the video of the chair. But I think that's one way to put it. And then, regardless of AI or not AI, I really think it's kind of, it's not really a hybrid. Maybe it's like a tribrid, if that's a word. It's a word now. Between a combination of like on-prem, cloud, and SaaS, right? So as I said, just pull in services when you need them. Sometimes they're more efficient. If you can use some sort of advanced data set to know when it's appropriate to pull in a service, and maybe that's more economical to do it that way than you would have done by spinning up another Kubernetes instance. Maybe that's some ways that AI can feed into that.
So what do you say, JP? Will AI help the decision making of where to put your workloads?
I think actually for using AI, the use of AI in our workflows, I think, is going to accelerate the use of cloud, because I don't think people are going to run their own AI services mostly. I don't see any way most of the companies in the world are going to be able to compete with whatever AWS or Google or Meta are building out there. If your question is towards will AI help us understand how to use it? So I think FinOps is a discipline itself, and it's quite a hard one, and also I think it's a challenging one because it varies from time to time. I think also cloud providers want to make our lives hard in that sense because they want to maximize their revenue. Of course, it's their business. So it's what we knew 5 years ago is not the same now because there are more services. There are more. It's not that they make it hard because they want it. It's because it's more complex every day. And in particular for media entertainment, there's also, I think there are a couple more angles, and it's some of the cloud providers are also in the media business. So it's also, am I helping my competitor to some extent? And also, am I giving a potential competitor, and I'm not naming just one because there are more than one cloud providers that have their own video business. Am I also giving them my data? Like, I think there are some concerns nowadays, in particular, about like, okay, it was fine if I was giving them my encoding, but now am I giving them my entire data set? Should I trust that they say they're not using it to train their own like stuff? So I think AI actually opens a very big question, in particular in media, because there are many media companies that are competing with the cloud providers.
I think you almost argued against yourself though, because in those cases, I think you do want to run some of the AI closer on the edge, right? So the capabilities of what you can do with like Whisper on just like a little ARM box with a GPU are pretty astonishing. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but you know, what if you're transcribing some super sensitive meeting, you know, of forward-looking financial data for some gazillion-dollar company? You may not want to send that audio track to the cloud to get transcribed, right? You may want to do it locally and not submit that to training. So I think the amount of power you get out of a little teeny NVIDIA GPU running on a tiny little ARM box is really astonishing these days.
But I know Apple has been working on being AI in your pocket. So do you think translation could be done in the device even?
Well, yeah, it can. They showed it with the headphones, right? I mean, it's like I could talk to JP in Spanish. That'd be awesome.
Let's try it.
Let's see that, shall we?
Let's see that later.
There's a little bit of a lag, right?
There you go. So, I mean, to kind of take a step back, we were talking about edge-based compute and use cases there, right? Like, you can get an A6000 card, you could throw it in, build out a little mini AI server, and you could build an individual piece, and you can get, 20,000 contextual tokens processed at a time. That's awesome. Except when you're shooting about 200,000 tokens and you go, oh, I need to scale. Like, I have to scale this. It doesn't make sense now. And also, I don't want to spend $10,000, $30,000 a GPU to make this feasible. So it makes sense to offload. To get deeper into the security layer, there's the idea of using group-based inference and all that, where you actually shared those training points of data. You don't have to do that. You can opt out of shared inference. You can also run your own encryption keys. You can also localize your data. You can do these processes to prevent any type of group exposure or even scene. Even within your own company, you can set up these guardrails and pieces. So these are all critical components for governance as a company to consistently look after. But as we continue to grow and expand, I agree, some applications are going to be great at the edge, right? You have your phone, you do translation, you can do some real-time componentry. Maybe that's the augment of taking that output and doing something bigger with it, storing it, maintaining it, growing it, so you can go, great, here are all the C-suite meetings of this year. We need to do executive summaries of what's transcribed. Great, run it here. It's going to take in millions of contextual tokens and output a really finite information. That's usability, right?
No, I totally agree with you there, because maybe you're doing something, and we were talking earlier about the traffic cameras and things like that. It's like you can do a bunch of stuff using YOLO and some other things to find a car on a screen and know which way the car's going and things like that. But if you get 5 cars going 5 different ways, you really don't have enough horsepower on that local machine to tell you if there's going to be an accident or not. And that's when you need to call in the big guns and go to a bigger model.
I think there's an interesting point about doing more things at the edge. For years we talk about like, hey, how do we push as much stuff as close to the customer as possible? And people like Akamai and other those kind of things, they keep kind of reinventing some of their services. But I think that it's kind of foolish to think that it's all going to be done like on a smartphone. Like, what is the operating experience on a smart TV, right? Or Android TV box, right? I mean, like, you have to build in certain things into an ecosystem to make that seamless experience across all devices, right? So it's not just the iPhone users, it's Android, it's all of the other permutations of where all the media is being consumed.
Yeah, I mean, even if we go back to broadcast, and we could use iPhones as an example, right? Blackmagic came out with a link box to be able to start doing SDI out, Ethernet, and drive. I think the idea of traditional camera systems for field-based reporters and operators are quickly changing down this path of being more versatile into what you have available to you, opposed to directionally, like you should be running a Canon C500, like you should have a strong rig with a dual backpack. Like, we're in a war-torn state. I can't do that, right? I'm in X country at X event. We just need to go, go, go. I think this brings the opportunity to say, I can do a little bit locally, where I can do some tuning, some coloration, some profiling, some streaming, ingest, and maybe some metadata enhancement as part of the send, which is the AI componentry or inference creation, and then send that to the cloud or to the destination. Obviously, I'm going to say cloud for some reason, but it gives the idea of great, not only can we take the TS segments or the HLS streams, we can record, we can write it, we can guarantee that it's delivering based on hashes, and then ingest that into systems for distribution. Doing that locally, you start getting into a lot of interesting firewall issues, hops, throughput, congestion, or even failures. You know, there was recently a failure where a government entity had a bunch of G drives stacked up and a lithium-ion battery caught fire and they lost the entire stack. There was no backup because it was too busy and they didn't have a contingency plan. So what do you do, right? Opposed to 11 nines of durability and availability, we start thinking about that, and data distribution models. All of a sudden you go, okay, great, I don't care because I can get my data back. It's not, I can access it, I can move it, and I can replicate it.
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, you mentioned lift and shift, and I think I mentioned it, and Barry mentioned it. But in what's disappointed me about the way the cloud experience has worked with a lot of vendors is that everybody's taken the approach like, just deploy my software on an EC2 box. It's a Windows machine. It'll be okay. The licensing is not crazy. But at the same time, like, how do I get active across those machines that I've just now deployed without going to a total microservice type architecture where the compute is completely irrelevant underneath? You can just swap it out whenever you need it. But those services are pushed across AZ or multiple AZs in different geos. And that gives you really the business continuity that the broadcast engineering folks for years have understood that that's why they're on-prem, right? Until we can get to the place where a lot of those manufacturers are moving their infrastructure or their software stack to the cloud in a way that makes that seamless shift happen so you can run multiple layers of GPU and CPU across a workload for resiliency, like it's going to be left to a couple vendors and making tough decisions about, does AI actually add any value to me in how I build my operations,
JP, you seem to have wanted to come into the debate for a while now.
I think it's interesting, and again, and I got your point before about security, Matt, and I understand it, but again, it's getting more and more complex every day. Like, again, I think on the capabilities and skill set, I think it's also a bit getting more and more complex, even faster than we can train our own teams. Like, it is, I think it is a big challenge on the governance, on the security, and then on the rest that we've already discussed.
Yeah, so I would take a step in the direction of total governance, right? Set policies at the global level. That way it doesn't have to be decided by individuals. You can say, do not opt in here, right? We will not allow these services, or we will only allow hosted keys, or we're only going to allow these guardrail parameters to operate within Bedrock or whatever it may be in order to do that. So it's not about having to train 300 people that all work for you or consultants that come through. It's like, nope, the parameters are already set. If you want an exception to the rule, let's talk about the exception, right? Where does it make sense? I agree. Things change at a very rapid rate. That's where you have to invest in education. There was a conversation about, what about junior devs, right? Do they get an opportunity, or does AI take their job? There's been some pretty big statements about this saying, if we don't invest in people to grow their skill set and to grow their technical knowledge, there'll be no one to be senior to guide the hand, right? It's the same idea that crafts are having a huge problem. Auto mechanics, welders, plumbers, there's not enough apprentices coming through, and at a certain point you go, hey, handyman, I need you to come over. And he goes, cool, I'll be there in 3 months. Like South Park made a whole episode about this, about going to space and being really entertaining. But it's a very true statement that advanced technical crafts, knowledge checks, and knowledge applications are worth investing into, right? Don't take the shortcut, because you will find in the end that maybe it wasn't the right decision, and you need to take a step back and evaluate what's your 5-year strategy, what's your 10-year strategy, and how do you get there with people.
One thing that has been a hot topic in Europe for a while now, and it's getting worse, is that with the situation we have in the world now, independence and being able to always be provisioned and always work, and so a lot of broadcasters and media companies in Europe now are trying to move back to European data centers and even local data centers to be able to run in case of emergencies, in case of something happens in the world that you can't know today. I know you guys at Amazon are working on a European version of the cloud in Berlin, solely separated from everything else, just to be independent. So what's your take on that? Will that shift your decisions?
I think this comes down to things like GDPR that come into play, where it needs to stay in region for operations. I think having a fact that we invest in our own operated backbone strategy and multi-pathing on those backbones, so there's no one single point of failure, is a huge differentiation than building a data center to operate, right? Let's say you're a broadcaster and you want to have a fallback or a failover data center, just in case, right? Worst case in the world, you want to have this. Totally understand. People need to be trained, it needs to be tested, it needs to be executed. Otherwise, when the dust kind of has to be kicked off, who's going to have the run book to do this, right? So no matter what strategy you take, I still have the idea of you should test often, you should have a run book, you should verify, adapt, and grow. And what that means is actually going through the motions, not just saying you're going to do it.
To your point, Magnus, I think it's also for geopolitical reasons, not only in case the data center is down, but also what happens like between countries' independency. And to your point there, yeah, I think that's a big challenge for Europe at the moment, because all these big cloud providers in the end are American companies. And there was a case in May, I think, that actually sparked all these conversations.
We have the exact same discussions in Europe, so.
Yes, I've seen that. So I'm not sure what the answer is going to be, but I think it's whatever it is, it's going to take a lot of years to go back.
I think part of it would be is, design your deployment strategies and design all your automations to abstract what cloud you're running from, or abstract where that data needs to live. And in theory, at least, it's I guess kind of similar to basic multi-cloud strategies, but just cover your bases. It would be strange if all of a sudden Europe banned Amazon, but hey, you never know.
Well, and that's what I talk about, the data center resiliency, right? Running workloads across, it could be multiple clouds, it could be multiple geos. Again, own your own destiny, right? At the end of the day, don't get yourself locked into a vendor relationship or a service relationship that you can't unwind and untangle, because not every service in AWS has an equivalent in GCP, as an example.
Exactly.
So Corey, you beat me to it. I was going to say, aiming for the lowest common denominator is a very scary way of approaching the problem, because you're aiming for what is the commonality across all platforms everywhere, on-prem and in cloud, right? They're never equal, to be honest. They never will be, and it's designed by that capacity, because you're going to build your data center the way you want it. Other clouds are going to build the way they want it. I would say optimize based on that cloud skill set and augment the pieces that don't fit, right? So if you're going to use transcription services, and you're going to be using video encoding services, whether it's on Amazon or Google or whatever it may be, one-to-one won't map correctly. So make sure that you have contingencies in place to say, if you fail over, think about it this way. And I think a lot of people miss that when they start making their run books, and they go, oh, it'll just shift over. It's like, no, hold on.
I made it sound easier than it is. No, but it's if you're using you know, Azure transcribe for something, and then you need to move to Bedrock or something like that. Yeah, absolutely, you need to have those contingencies.
Does AI flip the switch to switch it over?
Yeah.
You just turn the faucet.
Yeah.
You know,
Turn the
and-
faucet.
Whether you want it to or not.
Ask Oscar, like, and he'll do it.
Do we have any questions? We have a few minutes left before it's ending. Happy hour, yeah. We have at least one over there, so John need to run.
It's day 2. It's okay. It's got it.
Hey guys, I'm not sure if it's interesting question, but it's about VPC. You mentioned like SaaS versus VPC. So if I run my software in customers VPC, what do you do for licensing? Because you know you don't want to upset your customer by kind of shutting down license too soon if connection to license server breaks. Maybe give them a day or something, let them run for free. But also you don't want them to buy like few licenses and then deploy 2,000 times. So what do you do in this case?
So I'll give an answer, then I'm going to pass it down the panel because they're going to have softwares and experiences running these softwares. What I recommend to like partners on Amazon that sell through Marketplace and all that, make sure you have a good relationship with your customers and expectations set up front of this is a monthly license, it's an annual license, it's a per hour, whatever it may be. That way you understand and the customer should understand, should being the key word, of what that looks like. Should you have a grace period? That is your business decision of how you want to operate. When I was on the customer side, sometimes POs take a while to come through. And I've seen that happen where we needed a grace period for 2 months. And you know, if we have a good collaborative agreement and it's at the right scale, it can make a lot of sense. If it is very short and transactional and your license expires, it's your choice how you want to operate it. But I would defer to core.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm thinking more about like operational. So okay, that's one thing for setup, but operationally, let's say you may go with license server, and then you're tracking your customer use, but then because this is license server is like running all the time, you don't want it like to be too intrusive. Like you don't want to, customer lost connections to license server, shut down the service, and they have like 2,000 instances of your product running. So what's that sweet spot that you find in operations?
I think that one of the ways to do it, so you can run Wowza on Marketplace instances, you can bring your own license, different terms for either. But typically what will happen is if you start up an instance and that instance was able to start, it will continue to check in, but it won't just die if the license server goes away. You know, it'll generate a warning or something like that. But you know, we typically don't kill the instance because it can't check in. It usually is a transient thing. It's not something that typically lasts a long time.
Yeah, this gets into token-based leases, right? It's going to have a lease built into that for whatever time period that you accept. And if it misses a check-in interval because of network outage or whatever it may be, it should still persist if the terms are still accurate and ongoing.
Yeah, and you know, for different kinds of licenses, it's still calculating the time it's been running and what your hourly rate is or whatever the rate is. But we don't want to kill people just because.
Don't kill people ever. Please, that's our advice.
My experience has
to help
been that if you're running services in somebody else's VPC or another environment, that it should be built into the service contract that they're supplying the licenses, so they're responsible for the renewals, they're responsible for the revocation of certs and et cetera, whatever it happens to be. As an example, when I was at Xbox, we lost effectively every single app that ran on the Xbox 360 because the certificate expired because every app was built on the reference app that the original Ice Cream Planet guys built for Netflix. So when that cert expired that was built into the app, every other video app on the service failed. And we had to have Ice Cream Planet update the cert, resubmit the Netflix reference app to fix all those services. But it took us 12 hours, 18 hours to fix that.
Blame Babesh.
But it's he was involved with that. So it's one of those things where like always control your own destiny, right? And sometimes it's okay to give up certain controls of like licensing and other things, right? So yeah, I hope that answers some of the question, at least my point of view.
Do we have time for a final question somewhere? Or? No?
Who's ready for happy hour?
This guy.
I think we're waiting for happy hour. So by that, I think we
Let's do it.
should thank the experts. I think it's been a good discussion and happy hour.